facing a high-voltage warning his only way out. He knew that if they caught him now, as his pursuers' hands finally grabbed him, everything he had worked for would be over, so with no other choice he reached out and connected the wires, causing a massive surge of electricity to erupt from the panel, a conscious choice of death over capture. But this body held a profound secret, a heart of resurrection, and as his flesh burned away he did not die, for he was known only as the Resurrection Boy. A world where some people are born with special hearts, a rare mutation that grants these unique organs, which in turn bestow upon their users incredible abilities, and they were known to all as heart mutants. At first these strange new powers were seen as a blessing, but a blessing, he could only scoff at the very idea because his own heart was the very thing that had ruined his life, and now all he needed was to find something to eat, his eyes spotting a piece of discarded bread on the ground. So starving he devoured the stale food without a second thought, when suddenly he realized he had company, and offered his only meal to the small hopeful dog, a creature that gratefully accepted his kindness, just as more strays gathered and a distant noise caught his attention, making him peek out fearing the Institute had finally found him, but instead he saw a group of thugs cornering a high school girl, while from the deepest shadows his own skeletal form observed them. The girl pleading for them to stop, but the thugs were relentless, and his eyes noticed the bag of puppy food she was holding, before a voice from the alley commanded them to stop. As the skeletal man stepped out confronting the entire group, getting unnervingly close to the face of one of the thugs, who screamed in absolute unfiltered terror, while the skeletal man grabbed a sharp bone-like weapon from his own body, telling them to quit being so loud and just get lost, which sent the thugs scattering screaming about a ghost. And the girl stammered trying her best to thank him, but her strange rescuer simply turned pointing directly at her, causing her to recoil begging him to stay away from her, but he ignored her pleas grabbing the dog food she had dropped, and the girl could only watch in utter confusion. Because he wasn't attacking her, he was just eating the kibble, even apologizing for scaring her before asking if he could have the food, an act that made her face twist in horror, as she realized it could talk and fled in a blind panic. While the skeletal man just watched her go completely unsurprised, thinking that at least now he could finally eat in peace, but from a safe distance the girl was still watching him, questioning if he was even a living person at all, and wondering if perhaps he was one of the heart mutants, a deep regret filling her for judging the mutant who had just saved her, as he cowered on the ground surrounded by the stray animals. So she approached him again, this time offering a sandwich, and he was stunned into silence by this simple act of kindness. She even apologized for running away, explaining it was just his appearance, and for him this was the first time anyone had ever given him food, so he took his first hesitant bite. The taste an overwhelming heavenly shock to his system, where every single ingredient felt absolutely perfect, and in his eyes this girl was nothing less than an angel. So when she asked what she should call him, he revealed his name was Kim Jae-oh, and she in turn introduced herself as Song Hyeji. Then Hyeji asked him why he was hiding out here all alone. So Jae-oh explained that he was being chased by the Institute, a terrible research facility that imprisons heart mutants, and she had to ask what they did to people there, a question that brought back clearly painful memories, as he described a full decade of relentless agonizing experiments, leaving Hyeji completely horrified by his story, and then he revealed his power, the heart of resurrection, explaining that this endless regeneration was what left him like this, which made her eyes fill with a new and sudden determination. While Jae-oh could only hide his skeletal face in shame, but Hyeji stood up telling him to come with her, this schoolgirl suddenly grabbing his hand and pulling him along, leaving him stunned by the sudden unexpected contact, because even looking like this a girl had actually held his hand, and this unexpected kindness made him blush for the first time, but his thought was interrupted by a sharp crack, as his entire arm popped right off in her hand. And though she panicked, he calmly said it happens sometimes, assuring her that it just sticks right back on. After that, she brought him somewhere to get some new clothes, offering him a disguise so he could avoid all the stares. Just a few cheap items, but they were so much better than his rags, and he was so overwhelmed he could only call them amazing. The new clothes feeling like a second skin against his bones, but she wasn't finished with his makeover just yet, because his face was still a problem and she had a plan, involving a little makeup, a wig, and some glasses. Admitting it wasn't perfect, but it was at least a disguise, and she watched him closely hoping it would be enough, when suddenly she realized she was incredibly late for class, so with a quick goodbye she rushed away down the street, asking him to please look after the dogs for her, and in her haste he finally learned her name, Yoon, which made him wonder did this mean she would come back tomorrow, a feeling so different from the Institute where he was just an experiment. And he remembered how everyone else ran from his monstrous face. But Hyeji was the first person to ever show him kindness, so he turned to a stray dog telling it this was all thanks to him, and the dog just licked his face as he asked for its name, so he decided on Potato and the dog seemed to agree. Then he told Potato just how delicious that sandwich had been, thinking that Hyeji might actually be a real angel, and for a fleeting moment he hoped he could see her again, just sitting there in silence surrounded by the strays. But then the cold reality of his situation crashed down on him. He was a man on the run and he couldn't possibly endanger her, so he resolved to leave this place immediately for her own safety. He walked alone into the cold city night, eventually returning to a desolate concrete waterway, his body already failing, his skeletal frame becoming exposed again, until he finally collapsed onto the hard, unforgiving ground, only to be jolted awake by a rat crawling on his chest, making him realize he had just passed out from sheer exhaustion. As a sharp, twisting hunger pain gripped his stomach, so he pulled out the only food he had left, the bag of dog kibble, deciding he would eat it while pretending it was her sandwich, trying his best to imagine the kibble as meat and bread, when he suddenly sensed that something was wrong, and just as suddenly Potato appeared and stole his food, making him scream at the dog for eating his only meal, and Jayo's mind shattered in a wave of confusion, because a small dog was licking his face, and he had no idea how it could have possibly gotten here. Until a horrifying thought struck him, the inspector, but then a familiar voice called out his name. It was Hyaji, and she was absolutely furious, scolding him for leaving without so much as a word, explaining that the dogs had remembered his scent and led her right to him, reminding him how dangerous it was to be alone in his condition. So Jayo had to admit that he left only to protect her, but she just smiled, saying she was glad that he was safe. And that even the little dog Potato had been worried about him, because she had come prepared, laying out a miniature feast, having bought a ton of food from the local convenience store. And she prepared a special treat just for him, cookies soaked in milk, a combination he had never even seen before, and he held the tray, stunned once again by her incredible kindness, taking his first hesitant bite of the sweet concoction, a flavor so overwhelming that it actually brought him to tears, and he urged her to try some, but she just laughed at his reaction. When suddenly his severed arm began to rapidly regenerate, showing her in disbelief as the bones grew back before their eyes, and his newly formed hand reached out as if to touch her face. So she asked if it normally took days for him to recover, but he corrected her, saying it was supposed to take years, which made her ask if there was another way for him to heal. But he hid the truth, the part about absorbing blood to recover, lying and saying that for now just eating was enough, which made her wonder if the institute had ever really helped him at all. But he knew they only kept him alive for their endless experiments, and that was why they were still so relentlessly hunting him down. So she finally realized he left to protect her from them, and he confirmed it, telling her she shouldn't get involved. But she had a plan, declaring that they would go to the police, though he reminded her that the police would only see a monster. But she told him not to worry because her sister was an officer, and what's more, she was a heart mutant just like him. The profound shock of her words hitting him like a physical blow, and he could only stare, unable to process this incredible revelation, while she pleaded with him to trust her just this one time. But he remained silent, carefully weighing all of his options, until the decision was made and she said goodbye to the dogs, promising them that the shelter would be calling for them very soon, and a happy dog drooled on the ground, seemingly content with the news. While he knelt down to thank one of them personally, Potato, vowing that he wouldn't run away like a coward this time, and promising he would come back to see his good friend again. Then they left the shelter, waving goodbye to all the dogs. For 3 long years he had been hunted relentlessly, and for the very first time someone had reached out to help him. But a hooded figure with a skull face was watching from the shadows, when suddenly a car slammed into him, sending him flying through the air, and he hit the pavement hard, his makeshift mask cracking on impact. As a thug grabbed the schoolgirl Hyaji, silencing her terrified screams, while the rest of the gang rushed forward to secure their target, hauling the dazed and broken Jayo back to his feet, and nearby a single lighter sparked to life, as the boss finally revealed himself, gloating that he'd found his skeleton, ordering his men to take Jayo away for a little payback, and a convoy of black cars sped away from the chaotic scene, the side mirror revealing a truly horrifying sight. Jayo was being dragged by a rope tied tightly around his neck, and he gritted his teeth, feeling both powerless and completely enraged, knowing he had to stop them, tearing his hands on the rough asphalt, blaming himself for every single part of this, because it was because of him that Ms. Hyaji had been taken, his fingers shredding themselves against the unforgiving road, while the rope yanked him forward, scraping him along the ground. Feeling utterly useless, his incredible ability now failing him, he sent out a desperate, silent plea for any kind of help. And from the nearby woods an answer finally arrived, as a pack of dogs descended upon the dark road, grabbing the rope in their teeth, pulling with all of their might, making the thick rope strain until its fibers began snapping, and the lead car swerved violently, its momentum completely broken, while the dogs stood guard, barking fiercely at the vehicles, and a man from the van glared at them with pure hatred, as the thugs stepped out of their cars, approaching the scene, mocking the dogs for having the nerve to attack them. While the skeletal man could only watch, completely helpless, as the men swung their bats, brutally attacking the poor animals, and he realized with horror that they were fighting in his place, that he had to get up, he had to do something. But he was too slow, watching as another dog was struck down. When a desperate idea sparked in his mind, he needed blood. The blood spilled by the thugs, it could heal him, so he desperately crawled toward a growing puddle, needing just a little bit to regain his strength. But he stopped, seeing that one of his friends was down, his eyes widening in pure undiluted shock and horror, because the dog named Potato was lying completely still. And then he saw another and another. All of them, his only friends in the world, were defeated, and a memory surfaced, fueled by an uncontrollable rage. 10 long years of suffering in that research facility, waking up every single morning to endless painful experiments. The injections, the extractions, the constant, unending agony. He couldn't even die when he desperately wanted to. So he planned his escape, a desperate bid for his own freedom, believing that freedom would finally bring him some happiness. But the outside world had only despised and feared him, because to them he was nothing more than a monster, and inside his chest a strange and powerful heart beats. But Ms. Hyaji and the dogs, they were different. They had treated him like he was actually human, and that memory now fueled an explosive, terrifying power, his skeletal form blurring as it shot down the street. A silent scream of pure, unbridled agony. As dark energy swirled violently across the asphalt, and flesh and bone began to rapidly reform, his skeletal frame being covered anew with muscle and skin, his human face returning, his eyes burning a furious red, until he stood there completely and perfectly regenerated, looking down at his own hands, seeing his own body, feeling his true strength finally returning to him, a familiar and terrible power rushing through his veins. But then a horrifying thought struck him down. The dog's blood, it was their blood that had healed him. While the thugs could only watch in utter slack-jawed disbelief, their leader screaming at them to grab him again. But our boy moved first, a single punch landing with absolutely brutal force, sending the thug flying backward through the air, smashing deep into the metal side of their van. Then he gently held one of the injured dogs in his arms, and in the falling rain our boy cradled the injured dog, making a cold, hard promise to the men before him that he would make them suffer, and only one would survive his questions. His eyes burning with fury as he demanded to know where Hyaji was. Meanwhile, the scene cuts to a remote industrial compound, where a convoy of black cars pulled up to a large warehouse, and inside a bag was pulled over someone's head, the hood coming off to reveal a terrified Song Hyaji, who was confused, panicked, and utterly lost, as a circle of menacing thugs completely surrounded her, her eyes darting around the room, desperate for any answers. When she saw a horrific sight, a room filled with dismembered bodies. Before a hand yanked her hair back with brutal force, the SCARRED leader looming over her, a cruel threat shining in his eyes, and he showed her a photo of the skeleton, blaming him for her capture, telling her to stay silent if she had any desire to live, his cold dead gaze locking onto hers, saying that out here no one would care if she died. Just as the leader took a call, clearly annoyed at the interruption, his men on the other end struggling with a pack of dogs, frantically trying to explain that the skeleton had turned into a person. And the leader grew more impatient with their incoherent, panicked report. But Hyaji overheard, realizing the dogs had come to help them, and the terrible truth finally dawned on the leader: they had lost him, making him explode with rage, screaming about their utter incompetence. The gang leader, exploding in a fit of pure fury, grabbed the girl by her collar, demanding answers, screaming in her face about his lost and valuable prize, but terrified she could only insist that she knew nothing. So he pulled a knife, threatening to make her talk. And she realized her mistake: he was being hunted for a reason. As panic set in, knowing she was trapped and completely helpless, and the leader prepared to make his final move, when suddenly one of his men was sent flying across the room now a mess of groaning, fallen thugs, and a dark, imposing silhouette stood in the doorway, making the leader look on, completely confused, wondering who this strange new kid could possibly be. And one thug stepped forward, foolishly underestimating the newcomer. His taunts cut short by a powerful hand closing on his throat, shocked by the kid's incredible raw power. And the newcomer finally spoke, his voice as cold as ice, declaring that all of the other dogs were now dead. Enraged, the leader ordered his remaining men to attack, and a heavy punch landed squarely on his cheek. But he barely flinched, just spitting a bit of blood, as another fist connected hard from the other side. But he returned the favor with a single devastating blow, while a goon grabbed him tightly from behind. And they all swarmed him, trying their best to hold him down, his eyes rolling back in his head, his consciousness fading. A brutal memory of the fight on the road flashing past his eyes, leaving the thugs staring in utter bewildered shock, as our boy slowly, painfully got back to his knees, connecting the dots, realizing they were from the Hermes Institute. And the hostage Hyaji realized the horrifying truth as well, remembering the hooded figure she had seen from before. While the lead thug finally understood exactly who he was facing, recalling the warning about the target's insane regeneration, when a gunshot suddenly ripped through Jayo's back. The villain smirking, thanking him for providing such an easy target, screaming for his men to bring all of the guns they had, and the entire crew opened fire at once, unloading on him, motivated by pure simple greed, their only goal to overwhelm his legendary regeneration, a hail of bullets that seemed completely unending, and he was consumed by a wave of pure, unimaginable agony. His flesh torn to absolute shreds by the assault, very bones shattering under the relentless assault, until he couldn't even draw a single breath, and the hostage screamed for them, begged them to stop. As he collapsed to the floor, completely motionless, but deep inside him something ancient began to stir, his fingers twitching as his own blood pooled around him, a new terrifying pulse echoing throughout the entire room, as deep inside his chest a dark heart began to pulse, and a thug screamed for his boss to look, because the kid was getting back up again. They watched in horror, calling him some kind of zombie, so the boss gave the only order: he could shoot him again, and he felt every single bullet enter his body, tearing through his newly formed flesh and bone. But this time his body instantly regenerated around the wounds, and the pain was so much less than he expected, because everything he had ever faced before, all the suffering he had endured as a child, the brutal, crushing, and soul-destroying experiments, were all so much more painful than this. So he unleashed a single devastating punch, a blow that sent the boss flying across the warehouse, scoffing at their pathetic, useless bullets, knowing he could endure anything they could possibly throw at him, and the remaining henchmen could only stare utterly terrified. As our boy moved on to the very next target, his fist seeming to transform upon the moment of impact, blasting the thug clear across the entire room, while his allies could only watch in stunned shock, as he tore through every single one of them. Remembering the ones who had died to protect him, and vowing that he would never let them fall in vain, until the final thug screamed a desperate final warning, threatening to end the girl's life right there. But our boy remembered a promise he had made, a silent vow to never lose anyone important to him again. So he unleashed his full explosive and terrible power, the impact cratering the solid steel tank behind the man, and dazed and bleeding the thug looked up from the floor, his eyes filling with a look of absolute primal terror, begging for his life, promising him anything he wanted. But the kid's response was as ice cold as the grave. As an axe kick slammed down with brutal final force, the man's scream cut short by the impact, a fist grinding into his already broken face. The assault was utterly relentless, a blur of unending, furious, and hateful blows, leaving the thug as nothing more than a broken mess on the floor, his own bloody knuckles telling the entire story, and he stood alone in the quiet aftermath of the battle, his burning rage finally beginning to subside, when a small voice cut through the heavy silence, and he slowly turned his head to face her. She asked if he was okay, remembering all of his terrible wounds, and overwhelmed with relief, she ran straight to him. And the kid, the monster, finally broke down in her arms. She was just so glad that he was still alive. While Hyaji grieved for the poor dogs who had died for him, the girl admitting that she feared he was dead too, but he cried, just glad that she was the one who was alive. His selfless gratitude catching her completely by surprise. So she pulled him into a tight, comforting embrace, while he insisted that he should be the one thanking her. Suddenly, the sound of police sirens began to fill the air, as officers began cuffing all of the defeated gangsters, writing the entire scene off as just a simple gang war, and hiding in the trees they watched the arrests unfold. She revealed that her sister had warned them to stay away, and that her sister would handle the authorities from here, and once they were safe, the girl broke down completely. Hyaji, overwhelmed by the very same crushing grief, because they had found the bodies of the fallen dogs, and he quietly named each and every one that he had lost. While she clutched a dog to her chest, blaming herself for all of this, her one small act of kindness had cost them everything. But Jayo bit his own thumb, declaring that it was all his fault, and the girl watched terrified by his sudden action, as he wondered if his special blood could somehow save them, trying to let a single drop fall from his bleeding finger. But the blood swirled, refusing to land on the dog, as his accelerated healing instantly closed the wound. So frustrated, he bit down again, desperate to make it work. Just as he was lost in his own guilt, the schoolgirl grabbed his hand, pleading for him to stop, telling him he was wrong to think the dogs must have hated him, because she insisted they had actually loved him so very deeply, reminding him of a time when they were once wary of all humans, which was something our boy had never known. As she explained how they were covered in scars from past abuse, a truth he never saw, always thinking they were just gentle by nature, and she warned that his endless self-blame would only hurt their memory more. So he cradled one of the fallen dogs, his grief simply overwhelming, while she told him that their trust in him was such a powerful thing, that they approached him only because they saw a kindred wounded spirit, and he quietly thanked her for these words of comfort. As they sat together for a moment in their shared sorrow, when suddenly a tiny puppy appeared, just so happy to be alive, and they both stared, completely shocked by the talking animal. This little dog just wagging its tail, looking right up at him, prompting him to ask if it hated him for the loss of its family. But this puppy just licked his outstretched hand and curled up right beside him without a single trace of fear, until exhausted the little one fell fast asleep in his arms, which made the girl pull out her phone, deciding she must take the puppy home. But he had to ask what would happen to him with the institute still hunting him down, so she just told him to wait, running off to call her sister. And on the phone, she quietly reported that her mission was now complete. Later, they found themselves walking together under the dim city lights, finally arriving at the front of her apartment building, where she warmly welcomed him into her home, though he hesitated at the door, feeling far too dangerous to enter. But she dismissed his fear, entirely reminding him that he had saved her life. And besides, her sister really wanted to meet him to talk about the institute. He watched her, still so wary of this unexpected kindness, when he happened to catch his own reflection in the glass, letting out a sudden scream of pure unadulterated shock. She grabbed him, trying to calm him down, telling him his face was normal again, and he tried to explain that his regeneration was always stunted by their experiments. So for the first time in all these years, he was seeing his real face. His story was shocking, but something else was now bothering her. Now that he was finally healed, she had to ask him his age, and he actually had to stop and think about it, calculating all the years of torture and the time since his escape. 17, and the answer completely stunned her, as she realized with a start that they were the same age. He just admitted that he was happy to finally be treated like a person, a heartbreaking confession that left her utterly speechless. And she found his raw honesty to be both incredibly sad and endearing. So she dropped all the formalities, inviting him to come inside and eat. While they got themselves ready, the little dog also got a meal, and a proper steaming plate of food was set right before him. He devoured it instantly, completely overwhelmed by the simple taste, while she watched just happy that he was enjoying the simple dish. He declared it was the best food he'd had in years. And his hostess explained that her sister was called away for work. As a mountain of empty dishes proved just how hungry he had been, she then offered him the living room couch for the night, and he grew flustered accepting the warm blanket with a quiet thanks. She wished him good night and gently closed her bedroom door, leaving him standing alone in the quiet, unfamiliar space. His eyes scanned the room trying to take everything in, marveling at things like the impossibly thin television on the wall, and even the potted flowers a world away from the sterile institute. He sank down into the couch shocked by its incredible softness, and nearby the small puppy was eating from its own little bowl, but then the pup suddenly started to gag and cough, and he saw the tiny animal was choking on its food. A wave of pure absolute panic washed over his face, as he bolted across the room to help the little creature, stopping himself just an inch away before stepping on it, when the puppy looked up at him completely and totally fine. He let out a long, shaky breath, realizing it was just a false alarm. Later he settled down on the couch with the pup beside him, this small creature climbing all over him so warm and soft, and he quietly asked if the puppy liked it here too, deciding in that moment to give his new friend a name. From now on the puppy's name would be Fries. He was finally beginning to understand what people called happiness. It was a simple, delicious meal, a warm bath to wash away all the grime and fear, and a soft bed to finally truly rest in. But this newfound comfort felt so terribly temporary, because he knew it could all be taken away in an instant. A memory flashed back to him, a desperate, chaotic escape. As patients fled down a long, sterile corridor, and the guards were closing in on them so fast, an explosion suddenly ripped through their ranks, throwing bodies against the crumbling white walls as a soldier took aim ready to fire on them. But another escapee unleashed a powerful blast of fire, leaving the remaining guards completely stunned. A girl with dark hair summoned sharp shards of ice from her hands. While the skull-faced patient Kim Jae-oh was frozen in his fear, another patient used his power, thick roots bursting from the floor, as he glared at the guards determined to protect his friend. Kim Jae-oh's eye widened in absolute terror, but the girl reached out her hand urging him to move forward, and he took it, finding the courage to run. They had barely made it out of that hell alive, but in all the chaos they had been separated, and he knew they might still be out there suffering. He touched the small dog sleeping beside him, and knew he wouldn't lose this small piece of peace. He vowed to himself that he would protect this fragile new life. As a darkness flickered deep within his eyes, he would let no one ever take it from him. The next morning, his new roommate was preparing for school, and she asked Jae-oh if he could watch the apartment, since her sister would be working late again tonight. As she was leaving, he thought to himself that school sounded nice, but the dog Fries suddenly started scratching at the door, whining and crying, desperate to get outside. She wondered aloud if the little guy just wanted to go for a walk, so Jae-oh decided he would take him out instead. She immediately worried, remembering the people who were hunting for him, but he insisted his new healed face would keep him perfectly safe. Her concern eased, but only by a little bit, and she told him where to find the leash before rushing out. He searched for it as she hurried out the door to her classes. Outside, the walk was an immediate and total disaster, as the dog pulled wildly against the unfamiliar leash, writhing on the ground, trying desperately to escape the restraint. Its pained cries sent a cold chill right down his spine, and the sight of the restraints triggered a horrible memory. A flashback to being bound and electrocuted in the lab. He knew he had to use the leash to avoid scaring people, so he turned back ready to apologize. But they were already gone. Pure, unadulterated rage filled his eyes, as the kid sprinted down the street screaming for Fries. Tears streamed down his face, his desperate cries echoing through the air. A memory of the happy little puppy Fries flashhed through his mind. He ran frantically through a dark alley calling out his name, and desperately searched through a nearby trash can. He even checked underneath a parked car hoping to find him. Exhausted, he finally collapsed against the bin, as panic began to set in, wondering what he could possibly do. He imagined the worst, like Fries being hit by a truck, or even worse, being hurt by cruel and heartless people. He remembered his promise to protect him, and in just one day he had already failed. But then he spotted a schoolyard, and through the fence he saw Fries. The little dog was cowering near an ongoing soccer game, and he bolted, thinking Fries must have followed a familiar scent. A man in a tracksuit noticed his sudden approach, as our boy sprinted right past him, completely focused on the dog. This man, Mr. Lee, was shocked by his incredible speed. He was just a blur, yelling for Fries to wait for him. Inside the school grounds, a group of students were playing soccer. It was a scene of normal, everyday school life, and he watched from behind a tree, feeling like an outsider. His eyes widened, trying to take it all in, when he overheard some students talking about mutants. They were watching a video on a phone about a billion-won bounty, and he realized how the outside world truly saw people like him. He knew he needed to find Fries and get out of here fast. Just then, a small puppy came bounding into his view. Elsewhere, a group of girls were filming a popular dance challenge, and her friends were praising the popular girl Minjeong. She just smiled, soaking in all of the attention, when suddenly they spotted the little dog nearby. Minjeong scooped him up into her arms, absolutely delighted, and they decided to post a new video with the puppy. Our boy watched in horror as they posed for the camera with Fries. His sudden appearance from behind the tree made them all scream, and he stumbled out, trying to apologize for startling them. He wasn't trying to be a creep, he just wanted his dog fries back. Their anger quickly turned into a simmering curiosity. As they sized him up a first year they had never seen before, he asked about the video and they invited him to join in, but he quickly refused, saying he couldn't be filmed. So Minjeong changed tactics, asking for his social media instead, holding out her phone and offering to tag him in the post. Her friends were shocked. She had never done this for anyone before, and they told him she was an influencer with thousands of followers. She deemed him cute enough for her feed, but his hesitation was mocked. He finally had to admit that he didn't have an account, and the popular girl's confident smile completely froze on her face. He bowed politely, rejecting her offer once more as the girls watched in utter disbelief. Minjeong, the most popular girl in school, was just rejected. She seethed with anger, thinking he was just playing hard to get. Just then a new boy stepped in to claim his dog, apologizing to his puppy Fries while completely ignoring her. The girls were confused by this new guy's appearance. And nearby, a bully named Tagu was watching the whole thing. His friends told him the new kid was hitting on his crush, and Tagu's face twisted with a sudden violent rage. He demanded a soccer ball from his friend, who warned him about his dangerously powerful kicks. The ball actually deformed from the sheer force of his grip, but Tagu unleashed the shot anyway, saying it wasn't his problem. The ball rocketed through the air, heading straight towards the boy, whose eyes widened in the final terrifying moment. The puppy in his arms remained completely oblivious to the danger. He turned his body, taking the full impact directly to his head. A girl rushed over immediately, asking if he was okay. As blood dripped from his face onto the pavement, Tagu approached with a fake, insincere apology, feigning concern and claiming it was all just an accident. He smirked, telling him to be more careful next time, but the boy turned his face bloodied, demanding a real apology. Tagu just laughed it off, mocking his injury. But then he froze, remembering that Minjeong was watching them. The bully's friends chimed in with their own fake concern. Our boy said he was fine, only worried for his dog Fries, and he accepted the half-hearted apology, just trying to end the confrontation. As he walked away, the bully's friend seemed genuinely impressed, but the bully wasn't done yet. He wanted to know the kid's class. Alone, our boy clutched Fries tightly, admitting how scared he was for the dog. Still, he reflected on the brief, fleeting taste of a normal school life, wondering if he could have actually made friends here. A voice suddenly called out, stopping him in his tracks. It was the red-haired bully back again, but this time acting friendly. He put an arm around his shoulder, declaring that they were now friends, and as an apology he offered to buy him some bread. This simple, kind offer left the kid completely stunned. He stammered, asking if he was being serious, and even asked if Fries could have a little snack too. The bully led him away from the school, promising lots of bread, when suddenly a vicious kick slammed into the bully from behind. Our boy was knocked to the ground, protecting Fries as a new group appeared. He looked up from the pavement, his face completely unreadable, as a new leader emerged from the group, mocking his naivete. He was surrounded, the promise of bread now a clear and present threat. The original bully got up, mocking him like a performing clown, grabbing our boy, furious that he was acting big earlier. The reason was finally revealed. He thought the kid had hit on a girl, and he threatened to demolish the fake tough guy right then and there. The bullies closed in, surrounding him and mocking his little puppy. He had really thought this was a friendly meeting, and he tried to leave, but Tagu blocked his path. His friends weren't about to let him just walk away. His only concern was for his puppy Fries, who was trembling. The green-clad bully lunged forward to attack, but a single punch sent him flying backward. The bully was down on the ground, completely unconscious, and Tagu could only stare in complete and utter shock. Enraged, the others charged at him all at once, but our boy didn't even flinch at their approach. His eyes were cold, distant, and incredibly focused. As something deep inside him finally awakened, he moved like a blur of motion, taking them all down. A brutal punch connected squarely with Tagu's face, and the impact was absolutely devastating. He grabbed the bully by the hair and smashed his head directly into the nearby wall. The brick shattered on impact, crumbling to the ground. "I told you," he said softly. "Fries is scared." The others could only stare at the broken, crumbling wall, calling him a freak as they ran for their lives. Tagu finally realized the kind of power he had just faced, and he knew he was completely, hopelessly outmatched. The bully bowed low, begging for his life, and desperately showed him a photo of his own dog, begging for mercy, hoping to find some kind of common ground. The tense standoff in the schoolyard finally seemed to break, when suddenly our boy clutched his stomach, which rumbled with hunger. The bully paused, a sudden strange realization dawning on him, as he completely misread the situation as a sly demand for food. The scene then shifts to a quiet classroom after school. As they arrive at the empty school store, the bully pays for a feast of snacks, watching the MC's pure delight, standing back completely and utterly bewildered. Our boy happily eats all the food, sharing little bits with the small dog. And the bully is just baffled by this powerful yet childlike guy. He flashes back to the MC's devastating punch, a strength so immense it had cracked a solid brick wall. He decides he has to call for backup, dialing someone named UNKILLABLE. The call connects to UNKILLABLE, a gangster in the middle of a poker game, and the bully Tagu desperately pleads with him for help. UNKILLABLE is unimpressed, mocking him for losing a fight to some punk. But Tagu insists this is different, a final desperate request for aid. UNKILLABLE smirks, relaying the message to his waiting crew, claiming he's bored anyway and agrees to handle the dimwit. Tagu is flooded with relief, his backup is finally coming, and he hangs up the phone with a sinister smile, thinking he's already won. Just then the MC offers him a piece of his bread, and Tagu is stunned as our boy says he felt bad eating all alone. The bully suddenly finds himself offering him more food, and he even shares his own snack with the small dog. But then he notices something incredibly strange. His hand, which should have been injured from the fight, is perfectly fine. The bully watches him slowly putting the pieces together. Remembering an article he once read about heart mutants, he confronts the kid asking the forbidden question directly, and a panicked denial only confirms his growing suspicion. He's never actually seen one in person before, and the realization sinks in: this kid is dangerously powerful. The bully's boss gets the news in the middle of his game. His crew, armed and ready for a fight, listens in on the call. The bully tries to call off the attack, realizing his mistake, but his boss sees this as a massive opportunity. Just then the kid decides it's time to leave. The bully panics, his orders from his boss now crystal clear. Our boy smiles, ready to head back home, but he has to stall for more time. He makes a desperate offer to skip class together. Their destination becomes a local arcade, and the kid is completely mesmerized by all the lights. He's never seen anything like it in his entire life. Everything is new to him, everything is amazing. He spots a familiar-looking keychain inside a claw machine, and the bully can't believe his sheltered, innocent life. His companion offers to pay for the claw machine game, taking over the controls and showing the kid how it's done. The claw successfully grabs a small purple doll, and the kid is overjoyed holding his new prize. His companion smirks, knowing his plan to stall is working perfectly. He points out the coin karaoke booths just next to them. And inside a small room, he offers to pick a song for them. The kid is shy, admitting that he doesn't know any songs. A memory of a simple children's song plays out in his mind, and he begins to sing it, shocking his companion. The boy looks down at the floor, saying it's the only song he knows, explaining that his mother taught it to him before they were separated. The red-haired man is stunned by this sudden tragic backstory, and he starts to wonder what kind of person this kid really is. The story hits him unexpectedly hard. So he decides to show the kid a truly extraordinary life. They hammer away at a drum game with wild, untamed energy, and at another game the kid plays completely wrong. He stumbles badly during a fast-paced dance game. His companion laughs, calling him completely hopeless. They finally leave the arcade completely wiped out from the fun, and the kid says it's the most fun he's ever had in his life. Suddenly, the red-haired man's phone buzzes in his pocket. He pulls it out, annoyed by the sudden interruption. An angry voice screams at him through the phone. And the red-haired guy begins to panic. He was supposed to be setting a trap, not taking photos together. He remembers all the fun they just had, then his face hardens with resolve. The kid kneels on the sidewalk with his plushie, unaware of the coming danger. The red-haired guy is cornered in a dark alley, bowing low as he apologizes to his boss. But the gang leader isn't buying his excuses. The red-haired guy knows that none of this is the kid's fault, remembering that the kid's only family is a small plushy dog. And this thought is just too sad for him to bear. He looks at a photo of his own aging dog on his phone, crying, sitting with the kid and sharing a moment of quiet understanding. He realizes what's truly at stake here: the puppy's fate. The gang leader lands a brutal punch to his face, and the red-haired guy collapses to the ground. His boss grabs him by the hair, calling him by his name, Tagu. The leader demands to know where the mutant is, and Tagu recalls their happy time together at the arcade. The gang closes in around him, armed and ready for violence. The leader reminds him just how many people they brought for this, but Tagu insists it's all a misunderstanding, claiming the kid is just a weak, pathetic loser. He calls him a nerd, hoping this will be enough to save him. The leader sighs, seemingly accepting the new story. Then he puts an arm around Tagu, his tone shifting dangerously. The gang leader lights a cigarette, seeing right through his lies, and demands to know why the story has suddenly changed. The informant insists the target isn't human, that he's a real threat. But the leader just laughs, amused by his sudden fear. The informant stammers, unable to form a coherent excuse. Then the leader holds up 5 fingers, a number hanging in the air, offering 500 to sell the mutant to a broker. The informant realizes with horror this is human trafficking. The rumors of kidnappings targeting heart mutants were actually true, and he never imagined his own big bro would be a part of it. Desperate, he tries to downplay the target's value. But the leader's patience snaps, and he delivers a brutal kick. The informant is sent flying from the sheer force of the blow, crashing to the ground, unable to catch his breath. Enraged, the leader winds up for another vicious attack, stomping down hard and pinning him to the pavement. He orders his crew to beat the truth out of him, and the whole gang descends, landing blow after relentless blow. He can only endure the brutal, relentless assault. As a memory surfaces, a young boy being beaten by bullies. He screams for them to stop, but they don't listen to his cries. Suddenly, a group of older students intervenes in the fight. The bullies scatter in fear, leaving the boy on the ground. The leader grabs the boy Joe Tagu by his hair, telling him that they're family now, that he'll always protect him. A flashback shows Tagu being beaten on the ground again. He once admired these thugs, thinking they were so cool, but now his interrogator knows he's hiding something important. The large man sarcastically praises Tagu's newfound loyalty, making a business proposition about selling mutants for profit. He scoffs that loyalty dies when your own body is on the line, calling for chains and mocking Tagu's childish dream. A heavy chain is wrapped tightly around a fist, as the man preaches that real money is the only cool life. He offers Taegu a place by his side in this new venture, but Taegu looks up bloodied but still defiant, and tells the man he looks anything but cool. Taegu instantly regrets his foolish words, as the man's face twists with pure unbridled fury. Tagu scrambles back pleading that he misspoke, and the man raises his chained fist to deliver a final blow, but another hand intercepts his arm, stopping it cold. The large man stares completely shocked by the interruption. The chain is crude, designed to inflict maximum damage, and the other thugs wonder who this new kid could be. Tagu looks up stunned by who just saved him. It's Jayo, who says he simply got tired of waiting. Tagu desperately tells him to run away from these guys. But Jayo reveals a chilling truth. He was the one who called them here. And he even told them Tagu was a heart mutant, leaving him utterly betrayed. His knuckles turned white with a simmering rage, while the bully begged, claiming he was just angry, but our boy demanded to know why he let them do this. His mind flashing back to the gang leader's cold stare, just as a bat suddenly swung right for his head and the whole gang descended upon him all at once, with blows raining down while a small dog barked wildly, as the bully could only watch horrified and utterly helpless. Because these thugs knew he was coming, calling him the heart mutant, and his hand twitched in a growing pool of his own blood, making the lead thug sense that something was terribly wrong, just before a fist smashed directly into another thug's jaw because he was up a complete whirlwind of brutal focused motion, and one by one they all began to fall before him, leaving his opponents completely stunned by this sudden turn of events, until he stood alone just trying to catch his breath. When the leader screamed out the desperate order, "Kill him!" So they closed in again, ready to beat him to death, and the entire gang rushed him from all sides in a wave of violence. But he moved faster than any of them could even see, unleashing a counterattack that was nothing short of devastating, as another punch found its mark with a sickening crack, and a powerful kick sent another one of them flying through the air, while from behind a hooded figure swung a heavy bat, which connected hard against his back with a dull thud. Yet he deflected another bat with impossible blinding speed, sending this new attacker flying backwards into the alley wall, making the rest of his crew question if he was even human, and our boy grabbed another thug by the collar entirely unimpressed, while their leader screamed in a panic, "Just stab him," rushing in himself, claiming the kid would die just like anyone else, as the cold blade sank deep into his side, making him cough while blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. And the thug stabbed him again and again, screaming like a madman, but a hand suddenly clamped down on his wrist, stopping the attack, leaving the attacker to stare in utter disbelief, as the kid calmly told him that it was time to stop. And then he took the knife right from the thug's weakened grip, while the man demanded to know how he was still standing. So our boy held the bloody blade, considering the question for a moment, before saying, "You don't need to know," and striking back with force, which made the others panic, finally realizing he was a heart mutant, and a flash of movement cut off their only means of escape, because he was on them in an instant, his eyes glowing with a faint red light. And now that they knew his secret, he couldn't allow anyone to run, as a small dog barked somewhere in the darkened alley, and the last of the thugs were swiftly and brutally taken down, until he stood over the defeated men, the little dog now at his feet. Just then, a familiar voice called out his name, "Jayo." And Tagu panicked, seeing the deep bloody wound in his side, but the kid just stood up straight, simply saying that he was fine, which made Tagu stare in complete and utter disbelief, because the stab wound that was there moments ago was completely gone, and his mind simply couldn't process what he was seeing, while the kid looked down at the thugs and quietly apologized to them. And suddenly Tagu started beating his own head with his fists, as he screamed at himself for betraying his only friend. And the whole confession spilled out how he had sold him out because he thought being a thug was somehow cool, but now he could see he was just like them, a worthless coward. And the kid noticed his friend's sudden nosebleed, so he offered him something to wipe away the blood, and Tagu realized it was just a puppy pee pad, so he took it, bracing himself for another well-deserved hit, but the kid just smiled gently, saying that was enough, which left Tagu stunned by the unexpected act of kindness. And overwhelmed with emotion, his eyes welled up with tears, as he lunged forward, crying out Jayo's name in a choked sob, holding him tight, calling him a damn cool guy.